Aaron, one of the ship's interpreters, and I'm here on the Godspeed to talk about our ship's bell. Now, the ship's bell holds a very romantic place in our minds. They sound cool. They're often featured prominently in movies, and very often they survive shipwrecks. But the bell is not just a musical instrument that invokes nautical feelings. It's a very important piece of equipment to have on board ships. Ships are operating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So it's important to have the bell for commands on the ship, to structure the goings-on, daily activities on the ship, and it can also help aid in navigation. On ships like the Susan Constant, Godspeed, and Discovery, watches had to be set up and the crew divided as equally as possible. In the Sea Grammar from 1627, John Smith writes, "The captain or master commands the boatswain to call up the company. The master, being chief of the starboard watch, doth call one, and his right-hand mate on the larboard doth call another, and so forward till they have divided into two parts. Then each man is to choose his mate, consort, or comrade, and then divide them into squadrons, according to your number and burden of your ship, as you see occasion." The master and mate should know the experience of the crew and ideally keep an equal amount of experience in both watches. It's important to keep in mind that in the Sea Grammar, John Smith was specifically talking about warships. But merchant ships like the Godspeed, Susan Constant, and Discovery would have used a similar system of watches to divide the day amongst the crew and divide the tasks evenly. Watches would last 4 hours, and the bell would be used to mark every 30 minutes of that 4-hour rotation. At the end of 4 hours, you would hear 8 bells to signify every half hour of that 4-hour rotation, and that would be signal for the sailors to know when one watch is ending and the next watch is beginning. The watches in a 24-hour period would be middle watch from midnight to 4 a.m., morning watch from 4 a.m. to 8 a.m., forenoon watch from 8 a.m. to noon, afternoon watch from noon to 4 p.m. After 4 p.m. are the dog watches, with the first from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. and the second from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. These two watches would be for feeding the crew, alternating the watch system so no watch does the same shift each day, and it changes the length of the workday, so one group does 14 hours one day, but the next day they work 10. With these two watches, 3 bells are rung for the first hour and a half. But at the end, 8 bells would still be rung. The final watch is evening watch from 8 p.m. to midnight. This system could all change in emergency situations like storms, or when all hands are needed on deck for situations like fighting. Or when the crew is in port, the watches could be adjusted. In the Seaman's Dictionary, Henry Mainwaring writes, "In harbor and roads they watch, but quarter watch. That is, when 1/4 of the company do watch at a time." To keep track of the 30-minute intervals of the 4-hour watch, sailors would use the sand timer. Take 30 minutes for the sand to fall from the top to the bottom. Simple enough. However, when in use on a ship, rocking back and forth, the accuracy of this instrument does leave some to be desired. That can be improved by using multiple sand timers together, and then the average of them could be taken. So if you have 4 sand timers flipped at the same time, when 2 of them run out, you're probably closer to that half hour than if you're using just one sand timer by itself. This accuracy would be very important because not only are these sand timers used to keep track of the watches in conjunction with the bell, but they are also used for navigation purposes, as we mentioned earlier. Dead reckoning is a means of navigation wherein sailors would keep track of what direction they've sailed, how long they've sailed that direction, and at what speed, to give them an estimation of their current position relative to a previous known position. The more accurate your timekeeping is at using these sand timers, the more confidence you can have about what your current location is. There are other methods of timekeeping that can be used on ships as well. Ring dials and diptychs make use of the sun. Nocturnal can be used at night, and using the stars to determine the time. None of the tools is going to be as accurate as a marine chronometer, which comes later, but they do give sailors a rough idea of what time it is. That is also going to be important in another method of navigation called celestial navigation, where it's important that you take your readings at local apparent noon when the sun reaches the highest point in the sky. It is going to reach that day. Now you can measure the angle of the sun to determine exactly when that is, but it's important to have a rough idea of when you want to start taking those measurements, as you know you're getting closer to local apparent noon, and the sand timers would help with that as well. Time will become even more important on ships over 100 years after this first voyage to Jamestown with the invention of the chronometer. The marine chronometer allows sailors to compare the time at a known set location to their local time, and that time difference can be used to calculate longitude and will allow sailors to keep track of their eastward and westward progress. For centuries, the bell has continued to be an important tool and piece of equipment to have on board ships, and will help sailors to continue to keep track of time and manage watches, and issue commands on board vessels, even to this day. It allows for safe progress across oceans. And I thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me talk about bells and their use on board ships in the early 17th century. I hope you'll take time to come visit us here at Jamestown Settlement.